guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I'm going to do my April wrap-up. So this is going to be an interesting video for a couple of reasons. First of all, I haven't filmed a video in probably a month, probably more than a month, and I haven't actually posted anything to this channel in probably 3 weeks or so. So I have just been going through like the worst slump ever. I've been going through a reading slump, a blogging slump, a social media slump, a YouTube slump, everything, which is more commonly known as depression, but I'm kind of clawing my way out of this right now. I'm back to reading. That was the very first thing that I kind of like started to get back into, and then I started getting back into things like Instagram and stuff for my books, and then I started getting back into blogging, and now I'm finally back to YouTube. And it has been an interesting month because while I did read 7 books, I read nothing for most of the month. A lot of these were either things I finished up from the previous month. There is a novella in here, and I had some motivation to read some other things, which we'll talk about in a minute. But it has been tough. It has been tough, and I am feeling maybe a little bit more open to talking about this sort of thing if I don't edit this out, which I usually do in my videos when I talk about mental health. But I went to an amazing event at Waterstones Piccadilly. It was the Titans of Sci-Fi event with Alistair Reynolds and Emma Newman and Pat Cadigan and Temi O, and it was amazing and wonderful, and I got to meet Emma Newman afterwards at the very end, and I talked to her about how important her books are for me because they have such amazing mental health representation. Of course, was like flooded with tears and completely embarrassed myself and got a hug, and it was wonderful and everything. But after that event, I figured that I would actually start talking about mental health on this channel, so sorry if that's not something you're interested in. It's not going to be like a huge sort of part of this, but it is going to be something I'm a little bit more open about because it is something that I'm struggling with a lot lately. So that is one of the reasons that I am back now, as I kind of had that moment of feeling like I was more comfortable with where I was and everything, but also that influenced some of my reading this month, which you'll again see later on. So this is going to be an interesting situation with the books that I read because I don't have any of them, or almost any of them. I have one of the books that I read because the other 6 were either borrowed from other people, I have lent to other people, or were ebooks. So I just don't have a physical copy of them. So I'm gonna try to learn a new editing software because the time has come to move on from the Windows Movie Maker or whatever it is. And I'm gonna try to put the images of the books here, which is something I've needed to learn for over a year. So this is either going to go really great or it's not. If it doesn't and you don't see those images, well, let's just pretend this never happened. So because it was a funny reading month for me with this reading slump and everything like that, what I try to do when I'm getting out of reading slumps is read stuff that is different, completely different from what I've been reading. And you may have noticed in my past couple of wrap-ups that I've been reading a lot of fantasy. So I went ahead and switched to other genres. So I don't think I have any fantasy on this list of things that I read this month, which is interesting, and I'm kind of coming back to fantasy now in the month of May. We'll see how it goes. I'm a little bit cautious still because I just don't want to repeat the whole reading slump thing. So it looks like I read 3 science fiction books, 2 historical fiction books, and 2 contemporary YA books, which is really interesting because that's just so different from what I usually read. So let's get into this. The very first book that I read this month is an amazing book that I absolutely loved. It's easily one of my favorites of the year. This is Do You Dream of Terra 2 by Temi O. I did a full review of this book, so I will link that down below, but just to go over it very, very quickly, this book is a debut sci-fi novel, and it is about a sort of alternate version of 2012 in which mankind never really fell out of love with space. Many, many years ago, this planet called Terra 2 was discovered, and as the name kind of implies, it is a very Earth-like planet, and mankind has pinned its hopes on colonizing Terra 2. So we are at the point in 2012 when we are going to send our very first astronauts to leave the solar system and to go to Terra 2. It's a 23-year journey, and the crew is made up of kind of 2 sets of astronauts. One set are a kind of very seasoned group of veterans of the 20th century space race, and the other group are these basically students who have been training for this their whole lives. They've been handpicked from the British population and have been like trained and studying and all of this. This is what they have been meaning to do their whole lives. I talked about this book again at length in a review, so I will link that video down below, but I really love this. I gave this 4.5 or 5 stars. It's a truly fantastic book and you should absolutely check it out. Next up is the third installment in a sci-fi series that I really love. I really love. This is Before Mars by Emma Newman. Her Planetfall books are sort of a series of companion novels, so they kind of can be read, you know, you can jump in at any point, you can kind of be read in any order you want. However, Atlas Alone, which is the 4th one, is a direct sequel to After Atlas, which is the 2nd one. And I knew that Atlas Alone had some spoilers for the 3rd book, which is Before Mars, which is the one that I just read. So I decided to go ahead and finish off the series before I hopped onto the 4th one. I figured that I would just like dive into Atlas Alone as soon as possible and then catch up with Before Mars, but I was gonna like break my one rule of reading everything chronologically once and decided against it. So I ended up picking this up and I'm really glad I did. The wonderful thing about Emma Newman's books is that she does something very different in each one. So Before Mars is a psychological thriller, which is not something you get in her other Planetfall books. In this book we follow a woman named Anna, and she is a geologist and she's a kind of painter by hobby. She has a young family, she's married, and she has a daughter, and her artwork captures the attention of Travis Gabor. And if you've read the other books, you may recognize that name because Stefan Gabor, who's his husband, is kind of this multi-billionaire who operates very much in the background as kind of an insidious character. So Stefan decides that he's going to make money off of Anna's painting talent and send her to Mars, which he basically owns, to paint original artwork that he can hawk to his friends. So Anna is on her way to Mars. She arrives, she goes to her room for the very first time, and she finds a note written in her own hand. It's painted in her own hand, so she knows that it is from her, it's not fake. And it says to not trust the colony's psychologist. And everything kind of starts to get very weird from there. We don't really know what is real, what isn't real, what's in Anna's head, because she is very much an unreliable narrator, and she knows she's an unreliable narrator. And I just thought that that was so good. I loved this book. I thought it was excellent. As I feel like I am constantly like, you know, throwing Emma Newman's books at you guys, this video is going to be no exception. If you haven't read her books yet and you are interested in very character-driven sci-fi and you're interested in mental health representation in sci-fi, you have to pick up her books. They are so incredibly good. I would recommend just reading them in publication order, so start with Planetfall, and then After Atlas, then Before Mars, and then you can move on to Atlas Alone like I will this month, hopefully. But she's just such an incredibly talented writer, and she captures characters so very well. You really get their kind of internal thoughts and conflicts, and Anna is an amazing character for a number of reasons that I will not go into, but she's very much not your kind of average woman and mother in fiction, and she was so interesting to read about, and I loved her, and I really loved this book. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next science fiction book that I read was actually a novella, and this is by an author who I've been meaning to read for a very long time, but didn't get the chance until now. This is The Tea Master and the Detective by Aliette de Bodard. So I have known about her, and I've known her name for a really long time. I know that she writes these kind of very beautiful Vietnamese-inspired sci-fi books, and she's also an author of a series of sort of alternate history fantasy books that take place in Paris, and they're supposed to be so good. I think I have the first one on my shelf, but I've been really curious about her writing for so long. So I ended up picking this up because it was a novella and I could feel that slump coming on, and I just blasted through it. I really enjoyed it. The Tea Master and the Detective is a retelling of The Study in Scarlet by Arthur Conan Doyle, which of course is the very first Sherlock Holmes book, but it's very much its own thing. I feel like this is one of the rare retellings where you can definitely, like, you know what this is retelling, but it also very much feels like its own thing. This book takes place in a area of space called the Scattered Pearls Belt, and our sort of Watson character is a sentient spaceship called the Shadow's Child. And the Shadow's Child has gone through a trauma. Their entire crew was killed at some point in this area called Deep Spaces, which I think you can kind of kind of, but not really, think of as like hyperspace in like Star Wars or something like that, but weirder and more twisty and not the same thing even remotely. So the Shadow's Child has set up shop on a space station and has become a tea master. So they mix blends of tea for people who are going into the deep spaces so they can kind of hold on to their minds. It's basically kind of like drugs, but not really drugs. So one day they are approached by someone named Long Chow, and this is our Sherlock Holmes character, to go into the deep spaces to try to find something. And that's all I'll say for now, because it's a short book, so it kind of unfolds very quickly, but it's well worth it to kind of discover the story on your own. I really enjoyed this. I think it's a book that is definitely to be savored, which I feel like I don't always do that with novellas, because I'm like, they're short, that's great, I can just tear through them. I did not tear through this quite as quickly as I might have led you to believe, but it's a beautiful book. It's a really beautiful book, and it is a bit odd, and like, I love sentient spaceships, I love ancillary justice, and I want more of these books in my life, so I was like loving it, and I was totally like 100% there, but it is a very slow read, and I thought that it was beautiful. It's a beautifully done book, and there's something about it that's very, even though all these horrible things are happening, and you know, there's PTSD that's in this, and a crime is being investigated and everything, it's a very peaceful book in a weird way, and I put that down to the author's writing style. I think she's just fantastic. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this. I do, with a lot of novellas, wish that it was a little bit longer perhaps. It definitely could have been its own story, but I really enjoyed this, and I'm definitely going to check out her other books. So moving on from sci-fi to historical fiction, two very different things, because I did jump around, as I said, with genres a lot this month. I read The Assassin's Guide to Love and Treason, and this is by Virginia Boker. So this is an interesting one, because I love the cover, and I love the title, and I love the concept of this book, and I had only heard one review of this book, and it was not a particularly positive one. So I went into it fully expecting, you know, I'm gonna probably end up loving this book because the concept is amazing, and this is like totally a book that's written for me. And it was just okay. It was fine. Assassin's Guide to Love and Treason is kind of a slightly complicated plot, but it's so good and it's so amazing. So I'm gonna try to make this simple. It's not going to be. So basically it's set in Elizabethan England. And if you know anything about Elizabethan England, you may know that it was a Protestant country at the time, because Queen Elizabeth was Protestant, and to be a practicing Catholic was bad news. You did not want to be known as a practicing Catholic, as our main character finds out at the very beginning of the book. So Catherine is the daughter of a nobleman, and they are Catholics, and they sort of practice the religion in secret. However, that secret gets out, and they come to arrest her and her father in the middle of the night. Her father is killed in the scuffle, and she ends up escaping. So she goes from Cornwall to London, because she had found out that her father was involved in a plot to assassinate Queen Elizabeth I, and she wants to join up with the conspirators so that she can get her revenge. So our other character is named Toby, and Toby is a young man who's in the service of Elizabeth I, and he is basically kind of a spy master, and he uncovers a plot to assassinate Elizabeth I by Catholic conspirators. So one of the, I think, quite hilarious and super outlandish conspiracy theories about Shakespeare, this is important in a minute, is that Twelfth Night, which is one of my favorite plays, was part of a Catholic plot to assassinate Elizabeth I. So that is tied into this story, and he commissions Shakespeare to write this play, Twelfth Night. His plan works. It ends up capturing the attention of these conspirators. Catherine is sent to audition for the play, and she lands the role of Viola. So at one point she is a girl pretending to be a boy, pretending to be a girl. So she is kind of working towards this goal of killing the queen. Toby is working towards this goal of protecting the queen, and of course they are two young attractive people, and emotions get tangled, shall we say. So this sounds amazing, right? This sounds awesome. It's complicated, but it sounds awesome. It really fell flat for me, which is so unfortunate because, one, I love Twelfth Night and I love Shakespeare. We're huge Shakespeare fans in my family. And I love the idea of like someone who's kind of on the wrong side of history is this kind of questionable position. You don't really get that very often. I feel like our heroines are usually kind of the good guys, and she's trying to kill the queen. She's not a good guy. But also, I really love the fact that this is one of the few books that's kind of set in Shakespeare's time that didn't feel like hokey, you know? So often I'll find to like How to Stop Time by Matt Haig, our character is kind of like bumps into, you know, some playwright who's kind of crazy. He's like, oh, watch out there, Shakespeare, and it's super lame, and I hated every second of that particular part of the book, which is a nice book. I felt like this brought Shakespeare as a character in really, really, really well, and I loved that. That was great. That was the best part of the book, unfortunately. The characters were super flat. The whole kind of way that this conspiracy was playing out was kind of alright. It was just, the book is fine, and I wouldn't like not recommend it, but it was very fine. And that's not really something that you want when you think that a book is going to be amazing. So I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, which is maybe a little bit generous for how much I'm like raging right now about it. But it was alright. It was just fine, which was really, really disappointing because it should have been awesome. The next historical fiction book that I read is An Extraordinary Union by Alyssa Cole. This is a historical romance novel and it is set during the Civil War. And I really, really enjoyed this book. It's not quite as easy of a read as a lot of romances are, and I love romance and I love historical romance, but they usually don't deal with the same kind of themes as a book set in the Civil War does. This book follows a young woman named Elle, and she is a freed black woman living in the North. And I can't remember the word for it. I should have looked it up. But she has the ability to remember everything that she sees and she like hears and she reads. There's a word for it. I just can't remember what it is. And so this makes her the perfect spy for the Union. So she poses as a slave in the house of a Confederate senator, and she is kind of getting information and she's sending it to the Loyal League, who is this group of spies in the North. So she's our one character. Our hero is a white man who is also a spy for the North and is posing as a Confederate soldier. So I'm sure you can see where the kind of complications come in for this book. I'm going to be perfectly frank, I don't think anyone other than a black woman could have written this book. I just don't think it would have been possible. Alyssa does an amazing job of not only kind of, you know, building the tension, it's got a good story and everything like that, but really showing the uglier side of slavery, which obviously we all know is a horrible, horrible thing. However, she really, really teases that out. She does not shy away from some of the things that particularly women had to go through, and she does an amazing job with the dynamic between these two characters. So she does this amazing job of really kind of building up the tension, building up that relationship, and really showing that, particularly at this time period, the differences between people, even though, you know, our hero is very much on technically the same side as her, their lives are totally different regardless of anything that's ever going to happen, because she's a woman and also because she's a black woman. I'm sure that other people have gone into this much, much better than I have, but it's a fantastic book. I'm definitely going to read I believe there's two more for sure. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I just think that Alyssa's an amazing writer, and I'm definitely going to be reading more of her books in this series and in other series as well, because she has a sort of contemporary romance series that looks so good. The last 2 books that I read this month are contemporary YA books, and as I feel like I'm constantly saying on this channel, I don't often read contemporary YA, but there was something about both of these, which you will see in a minute, that captured my interest. The first contemporary YA book that I read was The Princess and the Fangirl by Ashley Poston, and I have a full review of this book, which I will link down below, so I'm not going to go into it too much here, but this is the second book in the Geekerella series. This is a companion novel to Geekerella. And I loved Geekerella when I read it, I think in 2017, and it's a super sweet book. It's super cute. I think I preferred Geekerella to this one. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars because I did really enjoy it. It does the thing that I love about Ashley Poston really well. So of course it's a cute and fluffy contemporary YA story. It's a retelling of The Prince and the Pauper, and that's great. But what she does is she not only celebrates fandom and cons and everything like that, she also does not shy away from showing the dark side of fandom. This is very much a response to the trolling of Kelly Tran and kind of kicking her off of social media. All of these actresses, especially in Star Wars, who have been dealing with bullshit from fans forever. We're seeing it with Game of Thrones now. Like, this is a total response to all of these things and the kind of actions of fans that are so horrible and so toxic, and I love that so much. I love that she does not shy away from that side of fandom. So again, that video is linked down below, so you can go ahead and check that out, but I did really enjoy this one, and I'm looking forward to the third one, which she sneakily announced on Twitter. The last book that I have is the only one that I actually still have a physical copy of in my flat. So this is a book that I am super, super happy I read. And it's one that I knew I was gonna love from the moment that I saw it and heard about it and saw the title and everything, and it was an absolute delight, and I really think that this book is kind of what got me out of my reading slump. This is My So-Called Bollywood Life by Nisha Sharma. My So-Called Bollywood Life follows a girl named Winnie, and Winnie is a kind of huge Bollywood fan. She's always talking about Bollywood films, she's always kind of referencing them, she always shows them to her friends, and she shares the love of Bollywood with everyone that she knows. And she has a prophecy about her life. Before she was born, it was said that she is going to not only meet her soulmate before her 18th birthday, his name would start with an R, and he would give her a silver bracelet. So she has this family friend named Raj, and their parents kind of pushed them together because he fits this prophecy, obviously. It's about him. So they dated for about 3 years. They went on a break for reasons that are told in the book, and he cheated on her. So she kind of she is getting over this sort of relationship, and she meets this other guy named Dev, and it's all it's basically a Bollywood film on paper. The reason that I was laughing just now is because this book opens I knew I would love it from this opening scene. This book opens with Winnie breaking into Raj's house and taking back all of the gifts that she gave him, which is basically a huge movie collection, and taking them out to the woods and burying them, which I was like, this is the kind of girl that I loved. It was awesome. I really loved her. I feel like that tells you a lot about her and what you need to know about her. She was an amazing character, and I just thought she was so fun and so fantastic. She has an amazing friendship with another girl who's obsessed with 80s films and the Colin Firth Pride and Prejudice, which as far as I'm concerned is the only Pride and Prejudice. And she has a wonderful relationship with her parents who are fully supportive of her desire to become a film critic, and it's so much fun. And even if you're not a Bollywood fan, or even if you are not someone who's hugely familiar with Bollywood films, I think you should definitely read this anyway. I have seen a few, I haven't seen a lot, but I still got the references in here. And the best part is at the very end you get not only a list of all of the films that she talks about in this book in order, but you also get just another list of more Bollywood movies ranked 4 stars and higher. And I would really love to watch through the entire list of films in this book because I love Bollywood, and I feel like with my very, very, very limited experience with Bollywood, this book is such a love letter to this filmmaking, and it's just so fun. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. I really liked the characters. It had a couple of pacing issues and a couple of little plot points that I was a little about, but I think that this is just a super, super fun book. It's an excellent debut, and I highly recommend picking it up. So that is it for the books that I read in the month of April. And I did not read as much as I had wanted to, but you know, sometimes that just happens. I have already read 3 books, and it's what, the 6th of May today? So I feel like I'm doing alright. I feel like I'm getting kind of back on the reading bandwagon. It was a tough month for a fair few reasons, but I am really glad with the progress that I made. In the comments below, let me know what you read in the month of April. If you've read any of these books or if they're in your TBR, I would love to hear from you. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.